The Justice League, the premier superhero team of DC. These paragons of virtue have long been the pillars supporting the DC universe. And I mean long been. We've gotten to the point where their sidekicks now have sidekicks of their own. This on top of the fact that DC is not well known for keeping their timeline straight. With several reboots and retcons and crises, we've seen characters like Diana, for instance, go from being thousands of years old to almost being younger than her own sidekick. So, with all this in mind, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and see if I can figure out the current ages of the founding members of the League, as well as their birthdays and how long they've been a hero. At this point, I'll again clarify that there's a lot of contradictory information on this topic, so we will be going over what is the most consistent. Starting off with the man the whole company is named after, we have the one and only Caped Crusader, Batman. That's a true fact, by the way. DC is named after Detective Comics. Literally, Detective Comics. I don't think they thought that one through. Well, in any case, Bruce Wayne quite famously became Batman at age 26, as detailed in Batman Year One. On first glance, this might not be so apparent, as Bruce is directly stated to be 25 at the beginning of the story. But the catch here is that Batman's birthday is, and has always been, except for that one time, February 19th. And by the time he goes out for the first time, it is March. Now, in post-crisis, Batman's age is a little hard to determine, as it more or less depends on how old Dick was when he became Robin, as he became Robin during year 3, and we know Dick is 25 by the end of post-crisis. If you want more information on that, you can go check out this video here, but while these ages vary, in post-crisis at least, they seem to most consistently have Dick as 13 when he became Robin. This would make Batman 40 by the end of post-crisis. So far so good, right? That is, until the New 52 hits. A big thing in the New 52 was bringing most of the original Justice League members back front and center. And this meant aging them down. You see, all the heroes have now only been around for a comically short amount of time, typically either 5 or 6 years. Batman being the latter, with him being 25 when he becomes Batman during Zero Year, with the main events of the New 52 taking place 6 years after that, making Batman 31. Now, the New 52's passing of time is all over the place, especially when they start slowly making it align more with post-crisis, and subtly begins aging everyone up. Like how in Batman 37, they established it's been 1 year since the start of the New 52. Keep in mind, Damian, the Robin at the time, was 10 at the start of the New 52, so this should make him 11. Shortly after this, a former member of the Whisper Gang states it's been 5 years since the events of the Court of Owls storyline, which would make Bruce 36 by this point, proving the timeline was definitely retconned at some point because the Court of Owls happening 5 years ago makes no sense, because Damian is only 13 after this. Next, in JSA 2022, they state Bruce's parents died 31 years ago, and that Batman Year 1 was only 13 years ago, making Bruce Wayne 39. The craziest one is when some guy says that Batman beat up his dad 21 years ago, which would have a crazy trickle-down effect of making all the Robins way older than we thought they were. That is, until Batman and Robin Year 1 came out and revealed Dick was now 10 when he became Robin. And all of a sudden, everything once again aligned with post-crisis. Except now Dick became Robin way younger, making Bruce way older. And in Batman 1000, they doubled down on this and state he has been Batman for 22 years. Still, this does raise the question of how old Bruce is, mainly due to the question of how old he was when he debuted in the current continuity. Some people claim that the series Batman the Knight, which showed Batman training worldwide, retconned it so that Bruce became Batman at 21, except that nowhere in this comic is that supported. And in fact, the writer of this issue says he wouldn't dare redo Batman Year One, which tells me that in the current continuity in which Batman the Knight was written, which details Bruce's training abroad, that this would lead directly into the events presented in Batman Year One. Meaning, if that's the case, then Batman still debuted at age 26. And if he has been Batman for 22 years, then that means Batman is 47 years old. Next up, we have the King of the Seas, Aquaman. Someone who is definitely older than he looks, having 4 kids and 1 adopted kid, who became a father of his own himself. So, it's clear that this guy's a family man. Except for the whole cheating on his wife thing and being a deadbeat dad half the time. Still, basically being a granddad, this would logically mean that Arthur here is getting up in years. So, how old is the King of Atlantis? Well, Arthur doesn't really give us much to go on. We know that his birthday is on January 29th, and we know that he was older than 17 when he became Aquaman. And we know that for a while there, he was actually one of the later heroes to debut, with Superman, Wonder Woman, and Flash, bare minimum, all being established before him. This makes things complicated, as we not only don't know how old he was when he debuted, but we also don't even know when he debuted. Or at least, we didn't, because DC decided to make everything a whole lot easier. While when each hero debuted was kind of up in the air, post-Zero Hour they established that they all debuted in the same year, something that remains consistent as recently as History of the DC Universe from 2025. So if Batman firmly saying it's been 22 years, that means all 7 members of the Justice League have been active for that long. So all we really need to do is figure out how old they were when they debuted and pray that nothing's been retconned. In some cases, this is actually quite easy. You see, while for the majority of history, Aquaman didn't have his age established, in the New 52, they gave us a few dates. Namely, him attending his 10-year high school reunion. From this, we can determine that he's likely 28, since you typically graduate at age 18. On top of this, issue 0 revealed that he became Aquaman 6 years ago at age 22. So if he and Batman both debuted during year 1, and Batman is currently on year 22, then that would mean Aquaman is 43 years old. This also means that so far, he's the youngest. But how about we move on to someone who's most definitely the oldest? John Jones, the Martian Manhunter. This guy is old. On several occasions, he is stated to be several centuries old. However, there was a time when they ended up making John Triassic, saying he was at least 225 million years old. Now, this was clearly an oversight done to make a reference to his first appearance in Detective Comics 225, but this is still insane. Not to worry though, as this has been retconned, because it's revealed 20,000 years ago the burning Martians were around, so John bare minimum has to be younger than that, making the 225 million year thing heavily retconned and wild. As for his birthday, we don't really know what it is, but we do know that April 24th was the day Martian Manhunter was stranded on Earth. Now, we don't really get many more specifics into his age, likely because it's so large as to not matter, except for one incident. Martian Manhunter issue 33. In this one, Darkseid attacks Mars and gets the idea for the anti-life equation. This has to take place at least over 300 years ago, as according to New God's Secret Files and Origins, 300 years ago was when Darkseid made the Pact of Highfather, and he made that pact in order to have more time to study the anti-life equation. Although it should be said John is likely a good deal older than this, seeing as how John was already an adult by that point. But all we can say for certain is that he is at least over 300 years old. Biologically speaking, that is, because in Rebirth, they decide to reveal that when John was pulled to Earth, he was actually pulled through space and time, with the Martians having been destroyed tens of millennia ago. Still, I don't think that changes his age though. Moving on, we arrive at the Man of Steel himself, Superman. Now, Superman's age is hella complicated, especially since for a minute there were straight up 2 of him, before they rewrite reality and do the fusion dance. And I mean, Doomsday Clock's whole meta-narrative is that Superman's age makes no sense. Off-rip, there are many things we can try to use to determine Superman's age. My mind immediately went to an April Fool's joke DC published saying that Batman and Superman are secretly brothers. This would mean there's a roughly 8-year gap between the two, but this isn't really accurate. Now, recently, in the Summer of Superman special, he says that 2 decades on, he still remembers being 16. This bare minimum means Superman is currently older than 36 and less than 46. As you would have said 3 decades on if he was 46. To get further into the weeds on how old Superman is, we have to discuss Superman's son, John Kent, as well as the, I'm not kidding, 3 versions of Superman we will be tackling here. You see, after Flashpoint, the New 52 introduced a new version of Superman, but then, in the tail end of the New 52, they reintroduced post-crisis Superman and revealed he had a son, John Kent. This was before they did the most literal metaphor I've ever seen in my life, trying to market that the new Rebirth initiative would be reintroducing things from post-crisis, by literally having post-crisis and New 52 Superman merge, thus creating an all-new Superman for Rebirth. Get it? Superman Reborn? Kinda like a rebirth. Wow. Anyways, John Kent, when he was introduced, was 10 years old. It's revealed he was born in secret during the final year of post-crisis. So now, we're gonna need to find out how old post-crisis Superman was at that point. For this, we can turn to the handy-dandy 0-hour timeline. Something that should be taken with a grain of salt, by the way, as it does some wacky things. Like state that Batman debuted 15 years after his parents' death. And assuming he was 8 when that happened, that would make him only 23 when he debuts, rather than the established 26 at the time. But regardless, this timeline states that Superman arrived on Earth 33 years ago, became Superman 10 years ago, and this year was killed by Doomsday. I'll also point out that this apparently happened 1 year after Tim Drake became Robin. And since he became Robin at age 13, that would mean he is 14 when Superman is 33. I mention this because Tim Drake is 17 at the end of Post-Crisis. So that means at the end of Post-Crisis, Superman is 36 years old. And 10 years later, when he reappears with his son John, he would be 46 years old. Now, I see the elephant in the room. What about his time on Krypton? How old was he when he arrived on Earth? That's a good point, as if he was a couple years old already, that would throw everything out of whack. But, as it turns out, Superman wasn't there for that long. The New 52 states he was only 3 months old when Krypton blew up. And according to pre-crisis, we know Superman celebrates his birthday on June 18th, aka the day he landed on Earth. But his actual birthday is February 29th. Putting this information together, and assuming both are accurate, I guess it's more like 4 months and not 3, but maybe he spent a month traveling through space. Long story short, this time isn't long enough to affect his age. Moving on to New 52 Superman, they established that this version debuted at 22 years old, 6 years before the New 52. And the New 52 takes place over 3 years, with Damian Wayne being 10 years old at the start, and Superman dying in 2016 when Damian was 13. Meaning, this Superman died at 31 years old, 2 years faster than the other one did. And unfortunately for him, he did not come back. Finally, we get to Rebirth Superman, and again, this all comes down to John Kent. Chronologically, he is currently 11. Although they did do some shenanigans to age him up to 17, but for our purposes, he is 11. He was born 11 years prior to this point in the story. And they pushed his birth back, so he was conceived shortly after the fight with Doomsday. And assuming 0 Hour is still accurate about Superman being 33 when he fought Doomsday, then he should be currently about 43 years old. Something that perfectly tracks with the established Batman 22 years. Because Superman apparently still debuted at 22 years old, and apparently did so simultaneously with Batman. So if he was 22 during year 1, he'll be 43 during year 22. And the way John can be 11 while Superman is 43 is because John was born the same year he fought Doomsday, when Superman was 33. Of course, if that's too tight a turnaround for you, they could have just retconned how old Superman was when he fought Doomsday. Next up,
Hal Jordan, Green Lantern.
do you know this guy doesn't even know what willpower is? True story, by the way. Anyways, this guy is weird, especially with how old he looked for a minute there. Hal's age is all over the place, and at the same time, completely vague. He mentions he got the ring when John was about 12, but this doesn't really help us, especially since they retconned John to be the same age as Nightwing for some reason. Next, there was a time when he said he had been Green Lantern for 15 years. And based on how old the other characters are at the time, especially based on the ages of the Robins at the time, that would mean he debuted a year before Batman. We don't really learn much else from this. Our first big hint to his age is when he says a 14-year-old girl is half his age, which would make his age 28 at the time. And this was in 1986 when Nightwing was 20 years old. But there is no way Green Lantern is only 8 years older than Robin. Like, no way! Especially if he debuted 1 year before Batman. There's no way Hal Jordan was a fighter pilot at, like, age 15. Another thing we know about Hal is that he enlisted on February 20th, his 18th birthday. And you bare minimum need a 4-year degree and 1 year of flight school to become a pilot. So the question here is, what is his rank? And put simply, he's a captain. Captain Highball Jordan. Next, we have to question how long ago it was that he left the Air Force and joined Ferris Air. Could be a short while, or it could be years, because it's left vague. Honestly, there's nothing in the mainline continuity to help us out here. But there are some Elseworld stuff that may. Specifically New Frontier. This is an Elseworld story that takes place in the past, but at the start of the comic, they say not to worry too much about that, and just take it as the characters we know, but in the past. So, if you want to stretch it, we could say that anything we learn about Jordan's age, we can apply to the mainline Hal. In this story, in 1948, Hal Jordan sneaks onto an airplane base and is described as quite young. Just a kid. But only 5 years later, in 1953, he is a pilot. And in the 50s, the youngest pilots were 19. So, seeing how young he was prior to this, let's make him as young as possible and say he is 19. Then, 4 years later, in 1957, he becomes Green Lantern, at age 23. Now, I'm not saying that in the mainline continuity, Hal becomes Green Lantern at age 23, mainly because I don't think it's possible for him to become a captain by that point, since in the Air Force it takes about 4 years to become a captain once you're commissioned, and you can only be commissioned after a 4-year degree. But if we take this to say that he became Green Lantern 4 years after becoming a pilot, then we could say that he was discharged shortly after being promoted to captain and only spent a few months at Ferris Air, which would make him 26 when he becomes Green Lantern. And since it's been retconned that he debuted at the same year as Batman, that would make them the same age, 47. Speeding right along, we get to the Flash. No, not that one. Or that one. Or that one. Barry Allen. And they just straight up spell it out for us. In one issue, when Wally visits his tombstone, we find out that he was born May 13th, 1956, and died in 1985. Meaning he was 29 when he died. And since Wally was 19 during Crisis on Infinite Earths, almost 20, that means he is 10 years older than Wally. If we keep that consistent, then Barry would be currently 39. Boom! Settled, right? I don't know about that. I'm pretty sure that's been retconned because I doubt he became the Flash at age 17. Especially since it takes 4 to 6 years to become a crime scene investigator. No, but there is another method to figuring this out. And it's quite straightforward actually, as in Secret Origins Annual 2, they just outright state he was 24 when he became the Flash. And if he's been active for 22 years, then he is 45 years old. Barry being this old is honestly a little shocking, but I guess it makes sense. Wally is currently a 29-year-old father of 3, and this was Barry when he met Wally, so honestly, this tracks. I guess the notion of Barry being younger comes from the adaptations more or less giving him concepts that belong to Wally West. And age-wise, he's really just a contemporary of the rest of the league. Finally, we arrive at Wonder Woman, the only member of the Trinity people debate kicking out of Mount Rushmore superheroes for some reason. Now, Wonder Woman has been simultaneously presented as the oldest and youngest member of the league. Honestly, it's something they've definitely flip-flopped on over the years. Originally, she was presented as being born centuries ago in what appears to be ancient Greece, and it's established that she also drank from the Fountain of Youth and would forever look 19. At least until she left the island. But after 0 Hour, they decided to go in a new direction and made her only 25 years old. Wonder Girl, Diana's former sidekick, was only 22 at the time, so her origin got completely shafted. It is one of the many reasons why Donna Troy has like 9 million origin stories. Anyways, arriving at the New 52, it seems that they were still making Diana normal age, and in fact, aged her down again to be only 23, before promptly aging her right back up, showing that she was in fact born during the times of ancient Rome, and I guess was only physically 23. This would make her over 1,000 years old, at least until Nubia and the Amazons went back to saying she was just centuries old. This ultimately culminates in the series Young Diana, a series in which she is 14, and yet she is given the book Alice in Wonderland, which came out in 1865. Assuming they still want Diana to be centuries old, as Nubia put it, then the earliest she can be born is 1851. Since this comic came out in 2022, that would make her 171, or 170 depending on the month, with her birthday, or I guess her being molded out of clay day, being March 22nd. But again, she is biologically like 23, meaning she ages 1 year every 7.39 years. I guess to her, humans age like dogs. All in all, when the dust is settled, the 7 founding members of the Justice League, from youngest to oldest, is Superman, 43 years old. A month older than him is Aquaman, who's also 43 years old, but born in January. Followed by the one and only Barry Allen, who's 45. Then Hal Jordan at age 47, with Batman also age 47, being exactly 1 day older than Hal. They are then followed by Wonder Woman, who is 170, and finally Martian Manhunter, who's 300 plus. Honestly, this is not what I expected going into this. I thought Barry would be the youngest, and I thought Hal would be older, but I guess that's just a sign of Barry aging well and Hal aging poorly, I guess. But with this, that's all I got for you today, folks. Be sure to smash that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.